Hey everyone, and welcome to the Phileas Club. This is episode 97 for October 2017. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Phileas Club. This is a show where we get people from different places in the world and we get together every month and discuss what's been happening in the news. So hopefully we give you a sort of multiple angles and opinions on what has been happening. Today we have like a full house. I'm currently in Finland, even though I've been spending a lot of time in France, obviously, as usual. My name is Patrick Beja, by the way. I should always remind people of that. And we also have currently in his car, daring all danger to be on the show, which I'm not sure I approve of. Turkey, how's it going?
Hey, Patrick. All is good. Don't worry. I'm a safe driver.
Yeah, people usually
I'll make sure
say
everybody
that.
has the accidents and not.
All right. Well, just know I disapprove. I would have preferred you waited until you got home to join the call. But
Hey, at least it's hands free, so I'm not
okay.
even
Yeah.
holding
Well,
anything.
yeah. If you were holding your phone, I would not have.
Hey, that's very popular in Saudi. People drive with their phones in their hands.
Terrible. We'll talk about driving in Saudi, I'm sure, a little bit later. So Turkey is in Saudi Arabia. I'm in Finland. It's 6:30 for us p.m. Wendy is a little bit farther west. I guess it's 5:30 p.m. for you. How's it going?
It is. It's good. It's good. Sweden's good.
Did it rain for you today? Did it snow, I mean, for you today as it did for me?
It didn't. It rained yesterday like I've never seen before. So I assume once it hit you guys, it turned into snow.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
pretty. I mean, October, snowing in October, like the ground is actually covered. There's maybe 10 centimeters of actual snow. It's insane.
Wow.
10 centimeters being what? Not 3 inches, something like that.
Yeah.
No, more. Wait. An inch is 1.5 centimeters. You and your crazy system. Franco is here as well. Last time you were on the show, you were in Spain, but now you're in France. How's it going?
Yeah, yeah. I like to move from time to time. Apparently, I lived in Madrid for many years. Now it's been like a month and a half that I'm living in Toulouse, France.
Excellent. So we have like a complete mix of like I'm from France, but I'm not there, and Wendy is from the U.S., but she's in Sweden, and you're originally from Peru. But you're not even in Spain anymore, and you're in France. Hopefully you can tell us a little bit about the situation in Catalonia. Even though you're not from Spain, you might have more insight on that than we do, since you were there. And finally, someone who is from the U.S. and certainly stays in the U.S., Justin Robert Young is joining us.
USA.
I'm really glad to have you on the show today because we've been talking about it for a long time and people have requested you be on the show to, I'm guessing, disrupt the entire operation. Probably what you're aiming to do. How's it going?
Oh no! I've always loved and admired have everybody on the show and the show in general. So I've been jealous, seething from afar that I didn't get to be at the cool kids table.
Well,
Justin is just here to celebrate Trump for us.
Basically,
Also
I hope that's what you do.
Also that everybody's red hats. Look under your pillows.
All right, cool. Well, I'm glad you're on the show. And you two, Wendy and Justin, also you're on the schedule, as I was saying before we started recording. So we're gonna get going. Before we do, though, I do want to make a quick aside. I'm wondering if I should do like opening monologues like they do in effect, I kind of do already, but formalize it in a monologue. I'm not going to do quite that, but I did talk about outrage last episode and how it seems we have been wired for outrage by, I don't know what exactly, but I'll get back to that. There were a couple of interesting comments in that episode. one of them was an example that someone gave from a teacher that was teaching children about grading. I was talking about the fact that we're always at 110% outrage for everything, and maybe sometimes we don't need to be, just be a little bit annoyed or concerned, but not necessarily seething and yelling about every single thing we can think about that bothers us. And someone left a comment about a teacher that would teach kids to grade their stress on like a thermometer. And she was saying, it was Fiona who was mentioning this, and it was one of her kids' teachers, and she would say, if one is your shoelace is undone, and 10 is somebody died, you should grade your stress on that to kind of understand how angry you have to get about something, and also maybe take the time to take a step back. And I think that echoes what I was saying last time very, very much, and I think it was an interesting way of putting it as well. And I also noticed that over the course of the last few weeks, we've seen a lot of media reporting on the fact that social media, traditional media, have been reporting on the fact that social media are responsible for a lot of that divisiveness and, turning the divisiveness into that outrage that I was talking about. But I think they're very right, but I think there are two things to note here. First, social media is doing something about it. I think they're taking the issue very seriously, but traditional media also has their part to play in it, and they have never taken the introspective look at trying to figure out what part they play in this whole story. The way I look at it, there's really two halves of it. Social media is providing us with the constant contact that it creates the outrage, because you're always in contact with the thing that outrages you. But the first half, which is necessary in order for that to work, is traditional media, and more specifically 24 Hours News Network, which create the fear, because they instill in you the fear that things are going badly. And I'm not necessarily accusing them of doing that, because that's just the way things go. When you talk about the news, you're not going to be talking about, the nice prairie where the dogs can run and have fun. You're going to talk about the things that are worrisome. But the systemic effect of this is that we're always afraid that everything is out to get us. And traditional media, what I will accuse them of is the fact that they have never taken that step to, look at what they're doing and maybe not even change things, but at least look at it and understand how it changes the dynamics in our society. So, I think this has created what I call outrage culture. I know, there's a lot of something culture, and not to make light of the rape culture issue, which I think we're going to talk about those things more specifically in an upcoming episode very soon. But the outrage culture, I think, is something very real now, and it has to do with traditional media and social media almost in equal parts. I wonder what you guys think about this. Am I off the mark, or is there any value to this? Anyone can speak. Or no one. Justin, certainly you have something to say about this.
But yeah.
I guess it's a really big question, right? And there's a reason why it's hard to kind of jump into, because on one hand, what is outrage and what is just natural reaction to stuff, and the fact that we have the one thing that is indisputable is we have far more media than we've ever had before, and in many ways that does by the numbers exaggerate what we think is going on. I mean, a violent crime has never been lower in America, for example, since I'm American, and I'm going to make American examples because I'm not the world travelers that everybody else is. But and yet public perception of crime is higher than it is, and because we see more of it. And that's been on the rise since television news really became a thing in the 50s. So, this is a natural extension of that. And there is a responsibility by the media to kind of portray things fairly, but there's also a responsibility by the media to keep the people that they have employed. And part of what sells now, and even in, the stuff like the Washington Post and the New York Times, are opinion pieces. And opinion pieces that are written as at times to provoke a reaction.
I agree, but I also think you can divorce that from politics to an extent. I was watching the report of the horrendous Las Vegas attack on, I can't even remember what channel it was, but it was probably something like CNN. And it was honestly, I mean, as a French person looking at this from the outside, it felt obscene. Like literally, it made me uncomfortable because they were using some of the, I guess, cell phone captured images from the people in the crowd, and putting it in a loop. It was maybe a 1 or 1.5 minute segment, and they had it on a loop with the sound and hearing the machine gun going off and going like, oh, so now tell us, Bill, what is this noise we're hearing? Is it, what type of machine is it? Like, it is voyeurism, and it felt just wrong. So I think in that context, it's not
say political. One of the most times that I've been very, and I'm very critical of television news, and specifically 24-hour television news. My bias is that I went through school, and for a very brief time I was a print journalist, and print journalists hate television journalists, and blah blah blah. But one of the most disgusting things I think I've ever seen on television was during the Houston hurricane. They had a live, just Anderson Cooper in a helicopter that was searching for people. And it just felt like the thing was, hey, maybe we'll see a dead body. Let's keep this live shot on Anderson Cooper as these people go through like the sunken ruins of these neighborhoods. And it's like, I don't go out there, shoot that, edit it together, bring back what's valuable. Like you don't need to do that kind of coverage. And I think that to me, I would agree. And I'm a very, 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 permissive kind of person media wise. I think, more is usually better, but that I found to be kind of just tawdry and disgusting.
And I don't subscribe to the idea that it's all fake news and you can't have the truth because everything's opinionated. And I think it's a different issue. But that certainly struck me. And I think it contributes to this fear, which leads into social media frenzy, creating outrage culture in everyone. And we're all guilty of it. But Wendy, I thought you wanted to.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out, there's a reason for all of this, a pretty good scientific one. And that is that we are essentially built to seek out what is dangerous so we can avoid it. Mm-hmm. So all they're doing is capitalizing and marketing and making a ton of money on the fact that we are all lizard brains a little bit, right? So you're going to show me something horrible that's built in my brain in order to protect me, to know. That's why news has always existed, right? It's just that in the last 30 years, what we can see and the detail in which and sort of, I think, kind of what Justin's talking about, the sort of, I'm going to call it the loss of the loss of people really sitting down and talking about what is right to show and what is good and what is helpful, what leads news to be good or whatever. I think now it's just what sells. And what sells is gory and, the most we can see, right? And so it really comes down to, there is a part of us that needs this kind of information in order to feel safe. But what's happening today is that it's having the exact opposite thing, right? I'm sitting in my little comfortable chair here in Sweden, and I'm prepping for this by reading all this news, and I'm like, oh, wait, I don't want to know any of this because now, my bubble is popped. And to some extent, I'm no less safe than I was 10 minutes ago, but I now am feeding the part of my brain that says, run, hide, seek shelter,
But I think on top of that, I think the reaction, I think the media isn't responsible up to a point, But at some point, it has, when it starts criticizing, rightfully so, social media and sort of being oblivious to its own role in this whole thing, that's where I have to call them out. But Franco, you also wanted to...
Yeah. For me, it's something has changed in journalism, because for me it has been the difference between journalism and entertainment has blurred a lot recently, because it's more and more hard to decide if something is just entertainment or if it's really a piece of a report of someone, an objective report of something. I remember, maybe it's just my memory being really bad, but when I read newspapers when I was a lot younger, it seemed the news were more boring.
If you were reading newspapers, you're not that young now, so you date yourself a little bit.
Yeah, well, the news were more boring in the sense that they were more about facts, about things that happened, and the objective was just to tell what happened, not tell it in a way that appeals to someone or is easier to read. And it's not a critique. I think it's important for news also to be a little entertainment and get people's attention. But I think social media is also part of that. If you get news by other people, they're not really journalists. They're people who tell stories, and they're not trained in the art of making an objective opinion about something. They're just people talking, and they're fun or they're informative, but they're not really that they don't have that objectivity that really, I don't know, for me, it's part of what the news is about.
So do you think...
Because it has to have a little bit of professionalism inside, that tells you, okay, I could not have written this because I don't have the capacity to get that much information, because I don't know, a big newspaper has the ability to find other sources, to cross check facts. I don't know. For me, I think there should be a clearer difference.
In France, we have that still a little bit of ethical. I mean, I think it's the case in every country. I don't subscribe to the idea that the media, they're all corrupt, they're all crap, they're all fake, blah blah blah. I certainly don't subscribe to that. But I think in France, it's still it's better. We do manage to take a few steps back usually, but I do think that without casting blame in the past, I think we should have come, now, if at no point before, to a realization that we need to take a look at the way we're doing things. And if going forward, people don't change the way they do things, at that point, I think they should be considered responsible for this as well. But Turkey, I'm not going to ask you about what happens in the press and the media in your country, or maybe I should. I don't know.
Why won't you ask?
My impression was that there wasn't as much decision making in the process of media in your country. But
well, yeah, that's kind of like that. Media is mostly controlled in Saudi, but you do have media that comes from other countries within the Middle East. But the problem is international. So whatever problems you're having in France, in Europe, in the US, it's still here. And I think here it's even worse because our media never really reached a point where it's actually evolved to a point that you can say, well, there it goes. Because during the heydays of the media here in Saudi, it was mostly controlled, 100% controlled in those days. And most of the other Arab countries, it was completely controlled media. So the values of freedom of press and quality wasn't exactly there. And when media got some freedom here, apparently they went to the extreme of being, I don't know, it's just a lot of the media here in the Arab world is either controlled by one party or another, whether it's a government or a political party or a religious party or anything like that. Or if it's free, it's most likely it's going to go to the lowest values of excitement and disgusting media, posting stuff
entertainment
that
type.
A way extreme entertainment type of media. If you see the Kardashians,
Like People's
for
Magazine,
example,
that's what you mean?
I'm saying Kardashians, for example.
Right.
Just
So
imagine
people,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, imagine that 10 times worse.
So tabloids and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we have a lot of that in the Arab world.
I've mentioned this a couple of times.
And it's mostly on social media now.
I've mentioned this a couple of times, but we don't have tabloids in France, like at all. We have People's Magazines, but they're not the same as tabloids, and they're a lot more tame, and I'm not sure why. I mean,
because they're forbidden. They're not allowed.
No, I don't think so. There are still some controversies with the People's Magazines we have, but no, I think the more sensible explanation is that obviously France is better in most ways. So that completely makes sense.
I really think they're banned. I mean, in France, they like banning things, so I would expect it to be banned.
The government says no, basically.
I mean,
yeah.
Wait.
All right, let's move on. Okay, Turkey, very quickly, and then we move on because we have to talk about the other stuff.
No, I just was going to say, I think one of the biggest problems in the Arab world when it comes to media is this culture lives on rumors and conspiracy theories. They survive on it, and the media just takes advantage of the whole thing, whether it's social media, whether it's television or traditional media, they all take complete advantage of that.
Yeah, that seems like it's bleeding into every type of media now. So, all right, let's move on to the actual meat of the show. And as you know, we basically take the one story that has been making the most noise, the most headlines from our local country, and discuss it with the other hosts. So I'm going to start, and I think the one I will choose is a derivative of the Weinstein scandal, which in France everyone insists on calling it Weinstein. I'm not sure why they call him Weinstein. The pronunciation is probably closer to the original, but anyway, Weinstein. So there's been a cascade of, the effect have been felt very strongly here as well. A lot of discussion, and I think mostly healthy and well-intentioned discussions, a lot of accusations, and being received the way they should be, which is to be expected given the context, but we'll have to see if it holds up in the long run. But close to that, there's another thing I wanted to mention because I think that one is kind of to be expected. It's the issue of écriture inclusive, which is basically inclusive writing, which is very specific to French and I'm sure other languages that have how do you say that? Like feminine and masculine names. And nouns and adjectives and everything. And so in the context of equality and inclusiveness, some people have been using for a while this style of writing, which has come to the forefront in the past few weeks, a little bit before the Weinstein scandal, which is a little bit hard to describe, but I'll do my best. Basically, if you say a doctor, you'll have a masculine version of doctor and a masculine version of a. So you would say un for a masculine noun and une for feminine noun. And if you want to be inclusive, and the thing is, if you talk about things in general, if you don't want to specify, then you default to the masculine. So basically, in the French language, everything when there's men and women defaults to masculine. The only case where it's only women, the only case where it's feminine in the language is when you're talking about women only, right? So it sort of tilts the language into some things where you assume subconsciously, or at least that's the theory, you assume subconsciously that everything is male, kind of, especially in areas that are male dominated. Like if you would say a doctor, you implicitly in the language, or not even a doctor, a doctor or doctors in general in the world, you implicitly say male doctors. And it's just a quirk of the language, which wasn't always like that, by the way, but it's just a quirk of the language. You don't specifically intend to say male languages, but it's still something that sort of carries a kind of weight in the current context where we're trying to have a little bit more inclusiveness. So some people said maybe we should have a different way of writing things, which would include male and female pronouns and nouns in the sentence. So what they came to was a way of having, and again, in English, it's really hard to explain, but it would be, let's say you say, you use he and she, you would put the S of she in, you would put, let's say, S point he, which would include he and she. That's the best way I can explain it in English. And you apply this to maybe in a sentence, a third of the words of the sentence. So, of course, you have a lot of people who are for this, because they think it's a more inclusive way of writing things, and a lot of people who are against it, who are being, who say it's unnatural in the French language, it's not easy to read. And of course, you have added to this a lot of people who start yelling about, progressiveness or feminism going too far, and those kinds of discussions are also happening. Although I have to say, I'm proud of my country, because it's not with the amount of outrage we're seeing on social media elsewhere. There's trolls and everything all the time in every kind of discussion like this, especially for something like this, but it stays relatively contained. So, that's one thing that was very French that happened in the past few weeks. I mean, in Swedish, they did this a long time ago, and, well, not a long time ago, maybe a couple of decades ago, and they have a pronoun which is neutral now that they're using a lot, but Swedes are very much in advance of everyone when it comes to equality. And that's the story. I guess I would ask Wendy what she thinks of this. She's the only woman on the show.
Yes, the representation. Okay, so I want to say one thing about sort of outrage culture, as you deemed it. There's a thing that happens, right? You hear a story, and it feels like you have skin in that game, so you're going to be outraged because they got facts wrong, they got some nuance wrong, they didn't understand your feeling, your experience, your tribe, right? So then you have this platform to just freak out on, and you get a dopamine hit because you said something back. So if this were happening in a town square in real life, and someone got up and said, I'm going to talk about women's issues, and it was a dude, you may still have all of those same feelings because he's getting it wrong. And why in the world is he talking about it? And that's my people or my tribe. But you would then have to walk up to the person's face and confront them face to face, which would require all sorts of parts of the brain that are not required when we just text, a quick, angry reply. So there's a reason that sort of outrage has exponentially grown, because we have access to instruments to express it really quickly without thinking it through, or having any kind of real chance to hear another side or let someone explain themselves, etc. So saying that, it explains why it's just so tempting and so easy to get bugged. So I'm going to give you an example, and then I'll get into the women stuff. Is recently there's American Week at the Lidl grocery store here, and it is horrible. Horrible. Like the food they had chocolate pizza. Now, Justin, tell me how many times you've had a chocolate pizza, right? So it's just
not often. I mean, like, wait, was it a chocolate? Like, was it kind of like a cookie and then chocolate on top, or was it like regular pizza with chocolate on top of it?
A regular pizza, full size, covered in chocolate.
Hella gross.
Yeah. And then they had brownie flavored milk, which, by the way, I bought all of this because I had to see and it was all disgusting. So I was like, this is funny. I took a picture of it, put it on social media, and I got a thank goodness, a private response, which I can really appreciate. Someone just going nuts on me because I had made a reference to diabetes. I said, oh, this stuff isn't American. I rarely get offended, but I'm now offended because we don't eat chocolate brownies and chocolate pizza, whatever. And I'm just being obnoxious or funny, yeah? And she writes to me and says, I've had diabetes and uneducated people like you should not be blah, 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 blah. And what I said was, oh, wait, Americans selling something for a profit, even if it gives you diabetes? Oh, yeah, that is pretty American. So that was my joke. And I feel like I'm an American. I can make that joke, right? So anyway, she sort of gets really upset at me and says, I don't know anything about diabetes. And it really bugged her, etc. So I had a chance, because it was private, to write back to her and say, hey, I am so sorry that hit you the wrong way. That was not my intention. I was talking about diabetes type 2, probably should specify. And also, I just watched a whole program on diabetes after I got your message, because I wanted to make sure I was not being stupid, that I actually understood diabetes.
I mean,
let me just say this. This never happens to me. So I take them way more serious than you guys, who probably get this crap all the time, right? So let me just finish what happens. Okay, so I have a little dialogue with her, and I'm sorry that hurt your feelings. That was not my intention. Anyway, I hope you're okay. She writes back a couple days later, like tail between her legs kind of thing, and just said, I was having the worst day. I'm so sorry. It's just hard to live with this. And I was like, I know, that sucks. I don't know. I don't actually know what it's like to live with diabetes. And, I'm sorry you're having a rough day. Just because and the reason I'm telling you this is I was talking about her tribe. I made a joke about diabetes. And she obviously, that got under her skin, because that's an issue she faces and that's part of her thing. And I am an ignorant person making a comment. Now, she took it a little too serious because it's stupid family social media thing, However, to me, it's a good illustration of we can really set someone off when they perceive that their tribe is being affected. So this leads to my...
I'll tell you something.
Okay, go ahead.
Before you continue, I have never muted or banned anyone on Twitter, ever. And I talk about, divisive, explosive political stuff. I may have muted someone like for 2 hours or 2 days and then unmuted them. That's the extent of it. And the reason is, when someone gets really angry, I talk to them and try to explain. Now, sometimes I get trolls that are just trolls, and I end up not replying further than a couple of tweets. But usually, I would say 80% of the time, after a number of tweets, I put a lot of effort into this, and maybe I shouldn't, but after a number of tweets, we end up agreeing. And that blows my mind, because everyone else, Scott Johnson and, I'm sure many people go on about how, if someone says this, you mute them. And I don't have time for this. I just ban them. I don't want to talk to them. And I'm sure that they, that they get worse people than I do. I'm certain of it. But taking the time and talking to people, they change their opinion on me, and I change my opinion on them, and I learn something. So it goes to what you were saying, so I completely understand. Even though when I first heard about the reply, I was like, dude, F that. I wouldn't have, but yeah.
Right. I mean, and that's the other part of outrage is here I make some lighthearted, stupid joke about my own tribe. I can joke about the American diet because I'm from there, right? Like that's my right to be obnoxious about something. At least I feel that way, yeah? So then someone comes along and says, hey, you did something wrong. And that is, we could line up 100 kids, tell them all they're doing something wrong. And I will tell you, that's going to impact them. That is a hard experience to be told you're wrong. So here we do this all day long. We write something, someone criticizes, what we hear is, you're wrong. We get defensive. We have none of that interaction of eye contact, body posture, facial expression to decide if this person is evil or good or kind or mean or what.
That is one of the fuels, I think, of the, Brexit, Trump, all of these like reactionary movements, which is we can't joke about anything, part of it. It's like if you say something, you'll always find someone who says, you can't say this, and you can, and it also plays into the, feminist thing and the inclusiveness. And like, at some point, I understand that some people go like, dude, I was just, I was joking, and sometimes there are jokes that aren't really jokes that should be addressed. But I mean, the whole thing gets conflated. Anyway.
Right. And it's tricky. And so this leads to my, I wanted to say that first, because I think the whole feminist question and the sort of railing that's happened in response to the hashtag Me Too is interesting, because it's, I've had a couple face-to-face conversations with very progressive Swedish men, by the way, who are really interested in trying to understand why someone would wait 10 years to say they were harassed, trying to figure out why they didn't just say it then. Because in Swedish culture, more than probably any other place, there is a lot more voice for women here. But if you look at all of the hashtag Me Too's from all of the Swedish women, it's the problem is ubiquitous, of course. So this ability to have a conversation with someone without outraging and without jumping to, sort of being offended that we can't talk anymore is a real problem. Okay, so the news actually I was going to share is slightly different, but it's related. So you may have heard of this. There's lots of music festivals in Sweden, lots of comedy festivals, lots of festivals. And in the last couple of years, there have been a number of sexual assaults and, ranging from lots of things up to rape at these events. And so this festival in Norrköping, Sweden, was last year. About 23 people were sexually assaulted, and at least 4 more of those were rape at the festival. So it's, major bands. This is not just a small little thing. And this sort of keeps happening. And so lots of people are, of course, upset. And so a little Kickstarter was done, and there is a plan to have a women's only festival and the idea is like, until men can behave, you're not invited to this one festival. Anyway, so that's what kind of one of the responses. I think it's interesting, sort of this moment in time for women to sort of come forward and say what has been pretty scary to say in the past. And I think for a lot of good men who don't engage in any of this must be pretty shocking. Or maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe you've observed it and you're saying, oh, yeah, well, I kind of do think that's happened.
I think the way we were looking at it now, at least that's what I'm hearing from France, is like, it's the good men, which are, I would like to think, the majority of the men, are looking at this now and saying, and being much more forthcoming in the idea that this is disgusting and it should not, be, women should not be shamed into silence, and like the work of they're usually not trusted or believed, or all of those things over the last few years and decades has worked. And now the reaction is, okay, sure, we shouldn't be witch hunting, maybe, but at some point you know that something's wrong, and it's much more common than before to accept that yes, there is something wrong and it should be addressed, and the victim is protected, and the perpetrator is denounced. Now, It's in the middle of all of this scandal, but so we'll have to see what happens afterwards when things have died down. But I think that's the difference I would point as being quite clear among good men or society in general.
Yeah, and I think there's a tipping point that we're looking at now that is, not so long ago, we elected a president of the United States who is on tape bragging about sexually harassing women. And how that did not stop him from getting elected, I don't know. But that it's very telling. And if this Harvey Weinstein thing had happened in 2015, in the early 2016, would we still? I do wonder that. We've had a shift, this sort of awareness that's kind of exciting to see where it will go. I hope it makes things better. Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
I think there is one thing I want to add to this is that I think there is a culture shift in kind of the male dialogue of understanding, and nobody likes the rapist, nobody likes the sexual assault person, right? But you might like Jim, the guy you work with, or you might like the people that make movies you like, and you might like these other people, and now all of a sudden you have all these other kind of thoughts that compete with the idea that we can all agree nobody should be made to feel uncomfortable or God forbid, have something like rape happen to them. And what's happening now, I hope, with a lot of just how pervasive these kind of Me Too stories are, is understanding, no, this is a far bigger thing, and it's far closer to me than I might have perceived it before. And that's something that I'm sure many women are like, duh, but, I think that there is an element of ignorance. And it's willful ignorance, I think, without a doubt. But, hopefully if there's one kind of under the radar sort of culture shift that I hope does continue to happen is if we're going to, guys that don't sexual assault, is to understand that this is not a thing that happens far away behind glass. Like it is in your backyard.
And there's sorry. Can I just say one thing with
that?
That is there's this element that's kind of leads to my original point, which is, as a man sort of hearing this for the first time, I've talked to a couple just really good guys, dads, fathers, very, very progressive Swedes who are like, yeah, but maybe it's a witch hunt. Like that idea that maybe she's just trying to ruin his life or his career, like this suspicion about these accusations, not even the accusations, just me saying me too, that why now, or what is this about? They don't get it. And I think one way to understand that, instead of crucifying them, like, you fool, you idiot, how do you not know? What you do is you relegate them to a place of they are other and they don't get it. That is no way to help someone who's a good person understand. So and part of why they don't get it is, if you think of who you relate to, he's going to relate to the guy who has a career he established, he's worked really hard, and that he's putting himself in that guy's shoes, and he'd never do that. But what if he was accused of that? So his empathy is going to go towards the thing he understands. He doesn't know what it's like to be a woman who has to, have mace in her purse at all times, everywhere she goes. Like, that is completely foreign in his brain. So how can he get in her shoes when it's so much easier to get into the guy's shoes? So we have to sort of approach it a little more educationally, gently. It's when we scream someone down, we've just shut a door, an opportunity. And honestly, I think that's what sort of creates certain types of folks who just won't listen to anything, because no one's ever sort of taken the time to teach them or help them understand or see the point.
And I want to go very soon to Franco and Turkey on this specifically, but I do want to say that I think the courage and the quantity of these accusations has, at the same time been made possible because we listen more, and forced us to look at it in a more realistic way. Because we were referencing this for something else at last episode, but if it happens once or twice and people get half shamed into silence, and then you're like, it's easy to think, well, it's not real. Like, it's so absurd for good people to think that this actually happens all the time, all around them, that it is really a hard and I'm talking as a man, I think, as many men have that thought process. It's kind of hard to even believe that it is so common and impacts women's lives every single day, that kind of relationship. And the thing is, when the scandal is so big and it cascades into maybe something positive about social media, because everyone, people people around you, people you follow, people you trust, are given an opportunity to say, when basically society looks around, says is this real? And we look around and you have like a dozen, 100, 1,000 faces looking back at you and going and nodding, like, yep, it's actually real. Yes. And you look around and you're like, your cousins and your moms and your friends and everyone is saying, yes, it's true. At that point, you have to be, if you're, not ideologically opposed to, reality, you have to think, well, there's something there. And I think this is part of what's happening in this instance. I hope it's going to stick, but and okay, I do want to point out very last thing, we are going to be talking about this with multiple women very soon, and not just about this, so we'll be doing an episode on this. We're talking about this almost more from the point of view of men right now, but I understand that this is not the ideal situation. All right, sorry, Franco, go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question, and it's a very, very innocent question and maybe stupid. Before doing it, I just have to say that I really don't think I have much more to add to what you all have said. Yeah, it makes sense, and I completely agree. But the question is related to the level and naming of harassment and then this taking advantage of women, because of course, if you ask someone in the street if he's in favor or against Nazis, they're going to say, "Of course, I'm against Nazis." But if you change the question to, okay, so do you approve if you start with nationalism and etc., maybe you can get a I'm not sure answer. So the naming of the act or the circumstances is I think particularly tricky and important to, I don't know if define or regulate. And okay, with that, I'm going to name the question or the anecdote. 2 weeks ago, I was still here in Toulouse, having a good time in riding my bicycle in the middle of the street in the center, in the night, 10 p.m. or something, going to some friend's house. And passing through the center, I go through a street with, I think it's the main street, a lot of people, a lot of tourists, and people also having parties, whatever. And we passed through a group of, 3 or 4 girls. And of course, they were laughing and whatever. And while we passed, they pat me in the butt. And of course, for me, it's nothing. But I immediately started asking, so should I be ashamed of this? Should I be outraged? I mean, is this really important, or should I put a name to this? Of course, I didn't feel bad. I just felt confused about what should you name that. And if I would have been a girl, probably would have been a lot more serious, and especially now would be seen and felt as, okay, this is really bad. You should stop and call the police and get the person arrested or something, or at least report it. And I'm figuring out that would be this same episode is what, among other things, happened in the concerts in Sweden. And so for me, it's hard to put a category or say, okay, this if after this or above this level of attack, it's considered a problem. And I don't know. Yeah, for me, it's really hard to classify a name.
Yeah, I'm sure Wendy will have something to say about this. Very quickly, before she does, we had a conversation about anti-white racism with a few friends earlier, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And the thing people have to understand, at least that's the way I look at it, there is no anti-white racism. There might be instances of assholes being assholes, sure, but the reason why racism is what it is because it's systemic against a minority which is oppressed by, or not oppressed, but which is in some cases oppressed, but against which another group which has more power is being unfair in the simplest terms. And a core component of this is the fact that it is a minority, or that the power is being used against it. So in this case, for you, I would say, of course, if you reverse the thing and you get a man to touch a woman's butt as she's passing through, yes, it's a problem. But I would say it could be considered a problem with a man, but certainly not as big a problem. That's the way I look at it. Like, it's
not because of the minority thing, I'm guessing, because there's no minority in women and men.
Yes, there is. Of course there is. It's not a minority in numbers. It's not a minority in numbers, but it's a minority in the sense of who holds the power.
Power. Yeah, it's a power differential thing.
Of course.
Right.
Sorry, Wendy, please tell us how
I was just going to say, you guys are good. This is great. It's absolutely a power differential. And there's some... Okay, so you can have that same experience and have felt really threatened for whatever reason because of your own personal experiences. And that could have been just as horrifying to you as anyone else. And so it would be sexual harassment. That is sexual harassment. You were essentially seen as a piece of meat and you got slapped as you walked by, and et cetera. And so, yes, that's what it is. Now, it didn't bother you, partly because maybe you don't have experiences that have victimized you before. And it doesn't matter what gender, but the where the power differential comes in is that so often for women, the majority of their interactions that have any of this component is there's fear in there. There's fear for safety. There's fear for my physical well-being. There's fear and real risk that I could be harmed or lose something. So you take, it's maybe it happens, but it's got to be pretty rare that someone is sexually harassing their boss, right? So gender aside, you're sexually harassing your boss just fires you, right? Because they have the power. So,
well, depends if he really has the power. I mean, power is not only the position in the company. You can have power over someone still being under.
I think it's fair to say that usually the boss can fire you.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if you have the power, so that's what actually creates the minority status. It isn't numbers. It isn't, and that's why the sort of white racism thing is completely false, because this one individual may experience some kind of experience that makes them feel like a victim, and so then they say, "Oh, it's because I'm white," and here we go. But there is no evidence that the white race has undergone any sort of discrimination ever. I mean, all standards of beauty are basically based on white people. All conquering everyone has been basically white for the most part in the last however many years, right? So the power thing really is a factor. And so part of understanding, and I think for men in particular, getting into the shoes of someone who has been maltreated that way, belittled, sort of reduced to they are just their body parts or how they look that day. All of that is, it can be subtle to incredibly, active in doing so. It comes down to that power difference.
I'm sure there are some people who are going to say, well, then in that case, how do you know, if what you can do and what you can't do? And there's been a few excellent, tweets and articles about this. First of all, if you have to ask, then it's probably not right. Like that's a very easy way of looking at it. And there was someone, I'm very sorry, I don't remember their name, but she established the rock test. Basically, just think of that woman. You're not sure about whether or not you would be sexually harassing her or inconveniencing her by saying this or doing that. Just think of them as the rock. You're like, it's just Dwayne Johnson sitting there, and would you be saying that thing you're about to tell her if it was the rock? Very easy, very simple. It just takes care of everything. And also another one is, my wife pointed me to some of those. Just don't do anything that you wouldn't want another man to be doing or saying to you in prison. Super easy. That fixes all of it. I think it's pretty good. Turkey, does that play at all? I mean, obviously in Saudi Arabia, women don't have a lot of rights. How are those scandals relayed, seen, talked about?
Well, that's the difficulty about saying something about this, because I can give you my opinion like from day until tomorrow. But when we're talking about Saudi Arabia, it's really a lot more different. First of all, these scandals are never public in Saudi Arabia. You never hear of a scandal of sexual harassment scandal in Saudi. because these are never published, they're never distributed, and they most of the time the victims never even go ahead and report them, because we are in a culture in Saudi Arabia, for example, we are still, even though we have a decree that says after 10 months women are going to drive, people are still debating the right of women driving, whether they should or shouldn't, whether it's right or wrong. This is a culture where the woman is always to be blamed. Well, not everybody believes this, but the huge majority of the population, the woman is always to be blamed for being raped. It's her fault that she was raped. And that's the majority standard here in Saudi. So trying to discuss this from a Saudi perspective is a lot more difficult than it sounds. And
but I mean, in the case of those scandals like the Weinstein thing and that, Western worldwide,
most of Saudis would just look at it you would have the minority who would look at it like Westerners and would see, okay, that's scandal, that's it's a problem, it's happening, shouldn't happen. And the majority here would just look at, that's the corruption of the Western culture.
So they
what
think,
did you expect?
Yeah. So they still think it's bad, but they think, Western culture is corrupt, and so systemically they have rapists. And is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And in Saudi culture, rape is always bad. Harassing and molesting a woman is always bad. All right, but this is how they look at it. It's bad, and it should never happen, and it's completely wrong. And almost everybody, the mass majority, would believe that. But the mass majority also would believe, but that's why women should cover. That's why women should not work with men. They shouldn't tempt the man to do that. The man is wrong, but the woman is the reason he did it.
Makes sense.
So who is punished there? How does that work? If a known rape occurs, what happens?
If a rape happens, and if it's proven as rape, the punishment of rape is traditionally here is the death penalty
for the man.
For the rapist.
Yeah, for the rapist. For the woman, unless they believe that she brought it upon herself, as for example, she went out with him deliberately. So that's not a complete rape. So she's actually to be blamed because she went out with him. She shouldn't have gone out with him. In those conditions, usually the woman might get a punishment, but it's not up to the death penalty. Maybe some lashing or something, maybe some jail time. If it's an absolute rape, no, it's not fine.
No, of course.
And if it's a rape that she did not initiate anything, like she was just not doing anything and some guy comes up, kidnaps her, rapes her, or whatever, then there's nothing. But the problem is, by law, nothing would happen to her. But by culture, she has this stain on her for eternity. Because in our culture, a lot of people, the majority of people, would think it's her fault. Doesn't matter how it happened. She must have done something to let this happen to her, and that's the problem. And it's a very huge problem here in this culture. And there are improvements in Saudi culture. You see more people coming out against rape. We have more people coming out about women's rights and so on. And this is where the Western media really gets lost. They go and report some of these positive things. And then we have all of these views that this is exactly where Saudi is getting and heading to. But the fact is, most of these people, you are talking about people who are highly educated Saudis, who are mostly living in big cities, and who are very English literate, and they can talk internationally and with the media and so on. And these people, it's true. These people are developing and they are improving to a new phase. But the majority of the Saudi population is still very traditional population. You don't meet them that much because you have to go outside. You have to go to specific parts of the cities. You have to go to the small towns. You have to go to a lot of areas to understand exactly how the Saudi culture is.
But you have to start somewhere, right?
You have to start somewhere. But this is exactly what happened in the U.S., which is people said Trump would never win. because there was strong support for Hillary in everywhere, in the big cities, in the major metropolitan areas. Nobody even thought about Trump would be winning using all of these small towns, and that's what's here. You have to go and approach these people, and that's where you have to start with, because these educated people, they already know what's right and what's wrong. They know that the women's rights. They know all of these, and they're evolving and they're developing already. But nobody's talking to these villagers, these small towns, this culture, the majority of the Saudi culture, people and culture. Nobody's approaching them and telling them what it is and how it's done right now. And that's the danger, because if these people who are the influential people are keep on going and trying to impose their ideology on others without even trying to change to work with them, you would just starting an explosion, a bomb ready to explode. And this is what happened in the U.S. Nobody went to talk to these people in the suburbs, in the small towns, and
in the Midwest,
in the Midwest. Yeah, nobody talked to them. Everybody ignored them. Well, because they just talking to the influentials, to the big people, the known people, the cultural people, and that's exactly what happened. And this is my worry in Saudi, that this is where we're heading. We have to start talking to these small people, because these are the ones that this is how bad it could be. You're talking about a culture where a family member would know that his wife, his daughter, his sister was raped. He would actually go and kill her because of the shame that she brought upon them.
All right. Kind of hard to transition off of this, but we're going to try. Let's just, I want to ask Franco, how is more specifically the Weinstein scandal, do you think, being received, or these kinds of things, in Peru rather than Spain or France? I'm curious about, that part of Latin America.
I'm curious too. I wouldn't know how it is getting received. As a general thing, I would say it's of course in Latin America everything is, I wouldn't say more delayed, but more classic is not the word, but I don't know,
conservative. Yeah, there's more
conservative. Yeah, there's it's a lot more conservative.
So the attitude towards rape is blame the victim.
Well, no, no. The attitude against rape is, of course, we're not that conservative. Let's say no. Of course, raping. I mean, everything that's related to raping and at that extreme is condemned and punished by law and by society.
Okay,
by
right,
default.
Of course, but maybe sexual harassment and these kinds of things.
Sexual harassment, or even more discrimination against women. It's in that sense. There's a lot to do. Of course, one idea I had. I remember. I just remembered when I first arrived in. Maybe, I don't know if that really paints a little bit of a picture, although it's not really discrimination, but it's just represents how society sees women. When I first arrived to Madrid, I don't know, 7 years ago, I was shocked by the amount of, it's going to sound weird, but the amount of women that drive.
Really?
I don't know. I saw in this, it's not as if women do not drive in Lima, of course, but there's a lot more drivers that are women.
Interesting. That certainly says something about the makeup of society.
But for example, of course, you don't have women that are taxi drivers, but it's uncommon in general. But in Lima, I have never seen one, or bus drivers, or I don't know. There's a lot of jobs that are not made by women at all. That industry or plants and so forth. It's agriculture, yes, but industry or processing plants, etc. It's really hard to find women working there.
That's funny. That's something that struck me when I arrived in Finland a couple of years ago, and I saw the first construction worker that was a woman. I might have told the audience about this a couple of times on the show, but yeah, that was surprising to me. Like a construction worker, there were a couple of them in the building, and I was like, I did a double take. I was like, oh wait, what? And there are like baggage handlers in the airport that are women, and Nordic countries are much more advanced.
And in Sweden, you cannot find a male dentist if you tried. They don't exist. They're all women. Mm-hmm. And orthodontists, all of them.
It's at least in Peru, it's seen or hidden as a way of protecting women, saying they shouldn't be doing men's work because it's hard, or they shouldn't be doing this. I mean, it's not as if women hate women and that's why we try not to give them opportunities, and so the debate, of course, is still there. But I think it's more in the sense of in the traditional sense of we need to protect women from things that are made for men, or at least that's I would say that's the argument that is often. There would be an entire conversation to be had there as well, I'm sure. But all right, I know that Wendy and Justin have to leave in not too long, but of course we haven't heard a lot from Justin. Is there another story from the US that you would like to tell us about that's been making the news?
Yeah, they got strawberry Oreos now.
Ooh, really?
See, it's this kind of thing that just causes so much trouble for us Americans overseas.
Man, it's like an Oreo, but like, they like strawberries, like the fruit. Man, it's just, they're in one.
It's crazy. It's insane.
Wow.
Going on. Oh my God. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, really, the biggest thing out here right now is not only the Weinstein thing, but really how much it's cascaded to almost every part of every industry. Today there were reports that Mark Halperin, who wrote the Game Change book, and is a political director for MSNBC, used to work for ABC, and is one of the foremost gatherers of political information, is a serial sexual abuser and has been put on leave by MSNBC. And what's fascinating to me as somebody who came out of the journalism world is that a trend that has been around since the internet, but really now has almost completely reached the event horizon, is the flattening out of politics, meaning that there used to be the onus on somebody to call a reporter, or for somebody to get word to a reporter to come talk to somebody, and then the reporter decided, along with their editor, is this news? Should we report on it? And then that goes through whatever decision matrix that needs to go through. The reporting is done. You make sure that you did the best job that you possibly could, and then on deadline, you put out what you need to put out. What's happened with this Me Too thing, and I can't remember the last time that it happened at this scale with this velocity.
Just to explain, you've referenced it a few times, you and Wendy. The Me Too is a hashtag where women would say, I was also a victim of sexual harassment, right?
Good call. Yeah. So this has become a thing on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, where women are going out of their way to explain, at its most mild, just unnamed times in which they have dealt with sexual harassment, if not worse. And by and large, a lot of times it's the worse, right? And at its most, aggressive are naming of names. And so now what you're seeing is somebody says, hey, this person sexually assaulted me and they're a predator. And that's the story. And if, what you're seeing is a very interesting reaction of like, okay, so when do we report this? If you are a news outlet, because it's out there, it's news, it's being made, it's being talked about. Obviously, there are still libel laws that you need to adhere to if you've got an apparatus like a news organization does. But if there's 6 women all saying the same thing and all of it sounds almost exactly like each other and they don't know each other and they've never worked with each other before, then is that a news story, right? And many times what's happening is these reports will start being reported on, which means calling the boss and calling the person who's being accused of this, and they're resigning before the news story comes out, right? Because they know what they did, and there's no need to hide it. And man, it is a, if you are to take and again, the very important social element of this aside for a second and just look at it as how we are sorting this information, it is unlike anything I've ever seen in journalism. And it's a remarkable moment in time, because I think what we are going to see going forward will be built on situations like this, where when everybody has an ability to say exactly what they want, then the power structure of who gets to say stuff has completely gone away from the quote unquote sort of media gatekeepers.
I think there's a discussion to be had about the witch hunting element of this, which I think is a theoretical danger. I'm not sure we're seeing a lot of this happening right now in actuality. But I do, because we're talking about the U.S., it's easy to joke about this, but I do want to ask you, Justin, has there been, you always have people opposed on everything. Like, it seems even the most baffling things in the U.S., you manage to have people who are angry about something that appears common sense to the rest of the world. Do you have that same division happening in the U.S. about all of this, or is it strangely going, everyone is agreeing?
I don't know if everybody is agreeing. I think that right now there is such carnage that everybody is able to find a thing that they hate and cheer because it is being torn down. That's what I'm seeing. I mean, I read a lot from different angles for the politics show, and the far Trump right gleefully every day there is a new list of actresses that have come forward to accuse Harvey Weinstein or other people in Hollywood because they hate Hollywood, right? Or
right.
Media figures that have been taken down a peg because they hate the mainstream media. And meanwhile, the far, the feminists, like hardcore feminist left is, this is the biggest blow to the patriarchy that, we have seen in our modern era. Right. So right now, I think everybody is just kind of either gawking at the fireworks or very excited about what is happening, or is, just in a lot of ways, I think everybody's just kind of grabbing for the railing and just kind of wondering, like when does this earthquake stop, and what world were we living in, and what world are we going to be living in 2 months?
It's interesting that I guess everyone's finding unity in hating someone. Finding someone to hate is finally giving the U.S. A time of a little bit of quietness in the left-right division. That I think it's an interesting one.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, sounds like it. All right. Do we address I want to ask Wendy before we move on. I'm sorry, but I do want to ask you about the witch hunt thing. Is it something that is inappropriate to discuss now, or is it something that you have a solution for? Or, if anyone, as Justin was saying, anyone can report something on social media and it can become a news story. And by the time it is a news story, it kind of will remain reality for at least some people. You can never take it away. How do we deal with that, or do we even have to at this point, or is it, not the time, or I don't even know how to ask the question.
Yeah, no, it's a really good one, and I think the whole witch hunt concept is one way that these conversations have been shut down in the past. So someone goes to a higher up and says, "Hey, this happened to me," and it's part of the dismissal of these things. So it's a little touchy, right? That it's just one way to say, no, you can't take down Harvey Weinstein because, you're out to get him. A 30-year-long predatory history of this dude. Yeah, I think it's time people go out to get him.
I think for Weinstein, it's really established at this point. What some people might say is, well, anyone can now go on Facebook and write a 1,000-word post and say, I was sexually harassed. And I'm sure it will happen at some point that someone will make up a story, right? So how do we deal with that possibility?
Right. So let's say 10 people make up a story and 10 million say Me Too. I think we have a tendency to worry about this thing when the power differential is still there. Okay, let's say it was a witch hunt. Let's take the McCarthy era and sort of the Red Scare. It had more to do with what you were perceived to believe, and there's lots of ways to essentially witch hunt someone. Because if you think of what witch hunt means, it's, oh, we're going to throw you in the lake. If you drown, that means you were innocent. If you float, you're a witch. So you lose no matter what you do. That's the core of what a witch hunt is. This isn't a witch hunt. One person sending a post that's saying, this guy harassed me, like a neighbor or something, that will be judged and figured out amongst those people in that sphere. I think the bigger picture ones are obviously, the law will come into place. There's enough sort of impetus for it to go forward and be investigated. There was the example of an actress, and I'm forgetting her name, was taking a picture with old President Bush, the old one. And
41. I think it was Heather Lind.
Lind or something. And he groped her. He told her a dirty joke. He was just nasty old man to her. And she told her the people that were with her and her friends on the show, and everyone was very supportive. But what did they do? What can you do? Back 2 weeks ago, or whenever this happened, a month ago, there was nothing for her to do at that point. But now she can say, you know what? Old man Bush, sexually harassed me. And he did. And we have pictures of the event where he did this.
And
it's crazy.
This is probably the most American story. This has become a very, very fascinating story because the press office for Bush 41, HW, has come out and said, and so apparently what this was a thing that happened is he, and as was alleged by not only the actress Lynn, but also a few other people, that he would put his hand on their butt and say that his favorite magician was David Copperfield. That was the dirty.
Oh no!
The press office for HW for 41 says he has had, he's been in a wheelchair for 5 years. He's not able to lift his arm. And so if he is to put his arm around anybody, it is going to be the butt, and that is something that he does to diffuse the tension, hoping that people will get a kick out of it. And he now realizes that is not the case. But, that's not an excuse. I don't know how many times he told, he explained who his favorite magician was to men in pictures.
Probably not very many.
But it just is a fascinating place. The question that I really have is, how high do the flames reach, right? Mm. And that's a question that we do not know yet, and we are finding out more and more.
If we know about Trump having boasted about these things, so. Mm-hmm. Trump is kind of a unicorn. Nothing applies to him. So.
Let me just one little bit about the Trump thing, because absolutely the Access Hollywood tape was one of the most remarkable things that I have ever seen in my fascination with American politics. I thought that there was absolutely zero chance that anybody can recover from audio tape of you in your own words saying something like that. But we have willfully ignored horrifying things about presidential candidates that we have both liked and not liked for decades. I mean, Bill Clinton had a rape allegation against him when he was running both for governor of Arkansas and president of the United States twice. You know, and that's something that we can believe her or not, but that's something that's on the record. She's on the record with that, you know, and I don't know if that happens in the same way if a candidate runs with that kind of allegation in 2017 in the way that we have in the past. So as much as Trump is, listen, he is obviously forefront in everybody's mind, but he is not an isolated incident.
I think, yeah, no, I agree. But I do think that one voice whose, you know, credibility you can't determine doesn't equate many voices and audio tapes of boasting about, you know, it's kind of a false equivalency, I feel.
Of women who have alleged sexual assault too. You know, there's one rape that is on the record, but there are plenty there too. And again, I think if there's one thing that we hopefully have learned from this Me Too thing is that this is not a pissing contest. And if we are you know, we should not be like, well, he's more of a sexual assaulter and he's less of a sexual assaulter, or this rape claim.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying in the case of Weinstein, when you have 30 actresses who claim, you know, that has happened, at some point you have to say, well, you know, it's more probable than not. Right. But if you have one voice of someone saying I was sexually assaulted or, you know, I was raped by that person, it's more difficult to make your final judgment about that person with just one clue, you know, one element in the balance. And it feels like, well, I mean, that's a problem we're always going to debate. But
can I share a quick thought on that?
Of course.
So there's some interesting research about sexual harassment in the Middle East. I don't know about Saudi Arabia specifically, but Egypt and Israel and Palestine, let me put both of those in there. And where was the other place? Jordan, I think, but Egypt in particular. And what they have found, and this goes against what we would assume, the ones doing the majority of the sexual harassment are educated men. And you think, what? Why in the world?
So what you're saying is Trump definitely did not sexually harass anyone.
Yeah, because he's uneducated. No,
right. That was the joke. Sorry.
You ask yourself, well, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But here's when you look at the scenario that
maybe they were the ones who get caught, right? Because the other ones it's harder to get.
They were
I don't know. They're in towns, they're away from the city. I don't know. Yeah.
Possible, but part of why they know it was happening is they are underemployed. They're educated and underemployed. They're underutilized in the society. They aren't getting what they quote unquote feel like they deserve by being educated men. And so that's one of the postulates is that there is this, I deserve this. I get this. I have every right to this. So back to this power differential thing. So many of the men we're seeing who are being taken down by this are all in positions of incredible power and influence. So they make or break your career. What is Trump's response to the accusations of those 11 women who have accused him of harassment? Is they're all liars. This is a witch hunt. All the stuff we've always heard. And it's, if I can sort of get the victim to not seem believable, then I'm okay. And that has worked for a long time for a lot of people. And suddenly the floodgates have opened. It doesn't work when there's this many. I mean, this is the power of, obviously, social media. But again, think about that power differential. Do they think they own or are owed, or it's part of their job, part of the perks of being the powerful people they are? I think so. I think it's connected.
Ooh, babies.
I think that it's the exposure that gets. I think it could be that because they're important people, they get caught, or at least it's easier to identify them There is, I'm sure, a lot of people that, or these incidents happen without no one knowing, and there must be, for every case that we know or we find out, there must be a lot that do not get the coverage or the importance because there are no celebrities involved, and that I think that's also sad.
And I think that's what we were saying earlier. The Me Too campaign and social media in general, we started with accusing them of things, and now I think there's also a good side to it. What we were saying earlier, we're seeing that it's all around us, that it's everyone. It's not just the actress that has to deal with the producer or the director or whatever, or the president and some, the aspiring president and some woman who was in his office, in his team. It's what we're seeing, as I was saying, we're asking, is this really true? Does it happen to everyone? And 80% of the women we talk to, 90%, 100% of the women we hear back from, they say, yes, it is everywhere. So anyway, all right. I think, do you guys have to leave, Justin and Wendy, or not?
Yeah, I mean, I probably got to get out of here.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. So thank you very much for being here. It was a very Weinstein-centric segment. We're going to talk about other things in a minute. Thank you so much for being here. Why don't you tell people very quickly where they can find you? Start with Jury.
Oh, you can find me streaming at twitch.tv/Justin R. Young. And man, just go ahead on into your podcast catcher of choice and type my name, Justin Robert Young, and you'll find a bunch of podcasts about a bunch of different things that you can go ahead and check out. But I would say probably the two things that are most of interest to this show is one, Politics. That is a show I do by myself about politics. And then the new show that I do with Wendy's brother Scott, Unfriend Me, which is all about very, very explosive topics that oftentimes ruin friendships, both on and offline, and strain family relationships, that we try to take a bit of a deep dive on the history and the things at play and some of the science behind it, and then take live calls, which is both the smartest and dumbest thing that I think both of us have ever done. So go ahead and check it out. Unfriend Me.
I really enjoyed the show. I think it's super interesting. I will say one thing to Scott through you, Justin, before you leave, about that fateful healthcare episode, which
yes.
I would have many things to say about all of your shows, but I'll let it go because I don't want to bother you every time.
Right in.
About that one. When, I wrote back, I wrote an email and you addressed it, and Scott on the show said, something to the, roughly like, oh yeah, but we understand that you think that and this, how it works in healthcare in other countries, but in the US, if you say this, people will think, oh, you're this international person trying to tell us how to do things. And I understand that that's the sentiment, but the frustrating element of this is that you have people arguing back and forth, will a bicycle allow us to get to work faster? And they're saying, yes, maybe, but no, but yes, I don't know, we don't know, yes, it does. And you have a bunch of other people looking from the outside, saying, guys, we've tried the bicycle. It works. It makes you go faster. It's pretty safe. It does work. And the response is, we don't want to hear from you. And that is incredibly frustrating for the people on the outside looking at the debate and hearing this, not only can't we decide because we haven't tried it, but also when other people who have tried it tell us it does work, we don't want to hear from them. So that was, a difficult moment for me. But anyway.
that was hilarious. Patrick's like, tell us where we can find you online.
Yes, and I made it about myself. I'm sorry. Unfriend Me is an excellent show. I encourage everyone to go listen to it.
Yeah, and the episode that Patrick's talking about was about healthcare, where we made the conscious decision to not talk about healthcare beyond America. We decided to try to draw a circle in a show that's only an hour long, just for clarity of focus on American pushes toward universal healthcare and what it has actually sought to do and what has gotten pushed through and the solutions that we've tried to do. So that was definitely frustrating, man. I'll tell you what, man. I do know this: people from not America do like to fantasy book America. Like there is a lot of opinions about what we should be doing in America, and I have seen it on a certain level, but never more than with this show. We get emails from around the world explaining how everything is screwed up and how we should fix it. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there's a lot of opinions, man.
You know what it is? America is our big brother, and it has been for about 100 years. And there's a lot of love for American culture. It is essentially our second home for many of us. Whether we like to admit it or not, music, movies, internet, everything comes from America. So I think we're involved by default. So maybe that's why we care so much. It's care, Justin. It's care. It's not, we don't want to tell you what to do. It's just,
everybody usually ends the emails nice. You know, it's always the middle of them. One of them didn't. It's just one of them got really, really angry, but that was fun. They actually emailed again later to apologize. So it was cool. Anyway, unfriend me. Go check it out.
Unfriend me. And Wendy, apparently she can't speak anymore on Skype, something weird, but she has to leave too. So thank you so much for being on, Wendy. I will put the link to her Instagram on the show notes, and also Therapy Thursday and on TMS. She is there. It's Scott Johnson's show. TMS is a great daily show that you can go check out as well. So thank you for being on, Wendy. All right, let's finish the show with a couple of things. First of all, the Catalonia thing.
The Catalonia thing.
Catalonia, yeah. You had, there was a referendum there for independence, which I have very mixed opinions about. But can you tell us a little bit about this and how it went?
Yes. And as always, I'm going to do a very small disclaimer, because I'm pretty sure that if there's at least one Spanish person hearing this podcast, he will be outraged that it's me that is explaining the Catalan problem or situation. But on the other hand, I was thinking...
By the way, sorry, again to interrupt, I looked for people who could explain this and people who knew. I found a few people that in the end couldn't. So it's not like, yes, I wanted to, but it didn't work out.
Yeah. I understand. No, and it's good if someone gets enough outraged about me saying things, he'll be in the show, or she. So yes. It's good. Perfect. And we'll be able to make a proper show about Catalonia. Okay. I guess I'll explain, of course, again, my side of view, and it starts not the situation and the problem, but my experience starts when I arrived in Madrid, which was in the middle of the Spanish economic crisis. World economic crisis, but in Spain it was specifically strong. Of course, Spain's regions are especially autonomous, I would say, compared with other regions in other countries. Not to all of other countries, but it's in that sense it's really federal. Spain, in the sense that the regions have a lot of liberty to do things. For example, compared to France, it was made that way because there's a really strong sentiments in some, I would say, regions in Spain. I'm not sure if nationalist is a way to tell it to describe it, but there's regions that have a really strong identity. There's two specifically, the Catalans and the Basque. But there's others. There's from people from Galicia, and there's other regions, of course, that are proud. But specifically, the Catalan and the Basque, and these two regions have already, since many years ago, a lot more, let's say, liberties than other regions, in the sense that, for example, in how they can spend their taxes, they have more say on what do they spend them on. They have the right, for example, to teach and to use their languages in everyday life and as an official language in the region. And so in this context, of course, there's and even though they have this a little more liberty than normal, let's say, there's always been this discussion or fight from between Madrid, the capital, and these regions about how much liberty they should have and how much should they be allowed to do by their own. And I think that it's a debate that it's not only done in Spain. There's many countries, for example, Belgium is one, and I would say United States probably another one where there's a lot of tension between the central government and the states or the regions.
Right, but in the US they have state government and federal government, so there isn't like state level government in Catalonia. Is there?
Well, they do have a government in Catalonia. I'm not sure about the language, but they do collect taxes, and then they do spend part of their taxes in themselves. Mm. Of course, it's not the same as United States.
Yeah, it's not as right.
Explicit about it, maybe.
Right. So they do a referendum, and they want to decide. And the big thing was it was a referendum that was basically illegal and that didn't have any legal value. And the bigger
exactly. So the thing is, the legality is not under dispute, I would say. No, it's not. The Constitution bans regions from declaring independence by themselves. The Constitution says that in order for this to happen, all of the country needs to vote, and there needs to be, they need to change the Constitution. Sorry, and for that you need the whole country to do a referendum.
That's like the EULA you have to agree to when you launch a game or start using a piece of software. It's like they want to protect themselves, so they're like, yes, sure, you can't vote on anything unless everyone agrees.
Well, but in this case, it was not a written document that the Catalans didn't know. I mean, they were part of making this constitution. Right. I mean, when Spain get out in the 70s. The thing is, it is. Yeah. The thing is, the legality is not under dispute. The thing is, so that's basically one of the sides, the government side, and most of the countries, apart from Catalonia, it's okay. You cannot do this. It's not part of the law. If you want to, we can change the constitution, but that's a completely another discussion. And so for many years they have been negotiating. And so these declarations of independence happen from time to time, or not declarations, but these tensions, and they would get resolved by negotiating more liberties and so forth. In this case, the government didn't want to negotiate anything more. So in that sense, it didn't. You could argue they didn't help in solving the crisis. So, but it's not as if they encouraged them to declare independence. So they did the referendum. Less than half of the people voted in the referendum, and of course the ones that voted obviously were the ones that wanted to be independent. So it got 90-something% yes for the independence.
Of course,
but of course you have only 40% that people that vote. It's not really representative.
I mean, it's the one who wanted to leave who voted. So of course, and the thing I've heard is that the referendum, not only, it didn't have any legal value, but also it was kind of a weak, even within the country, within the region, Catalonia, it was kind of a, yeah, sure, whatever, do what you want, but we're not sure it's the best idea. And when inexplicably from the outside, the Spanish government went in and sent police to brutalize the people who were voting and close down the polling booths and the voting stations and all of this. It was kind of really difficult to understand why the Spanish government would even do that, because there was nothing to gain. It was like the only thing that could come out of all of this would be for the public opinion within the country and without to be that the Spanish government has lost its mind. That they're. That's what.
Yes,
So that's what I want to ask. Why did they do it?
Yeah, and just another disclaimer. I'm not in the part of the government. I'm not sure about. I do think that it shouldn't be done because it's illegal. But apart from that, which is really,
but what
really
are,
big,
do you have an insight into what tensions or what having lived in Spain for so long? Do you think it's something that the Spanish the Spanish population outside of Catalonia would think? Yes, of course, we should go and send the police and the army and take people out of the, does this feel justified, do you think, for the Spanish?
They wouldn't support the violence, but the police going, yeah, of course. I mean, it's as if some region is doing something, not a region, it's like a group of people somewhere in the country is doing something illegal. Shouldn't the police intervene? I mean, at least for me, it's common sense that the one responsibility of any government is to provide peace and I don't know. It's not violence, but in the sense that you shouldn't allow things that are illegal and people declaring independence and voting for their independence and trying to secede. I think that.
But was it going?
People from outside say, "Okay, the violence. The government suppressing the people." I mean, the violence. Yes, it's really a shame that the government had turned into violence to stop the voting. But stopping the voting is what they should have done. Okay. I don't know. I mean, it's. I don't see how other option. What could they do?
I mean, the other option would have been to
let them vote, and then these Catalans, they will vote, and then nothing will happen. If you follow news related to Catalonia, you'll know that it's not that they just voting because they want to vote. They do really want independence, and unless the government does something, they will go. I mean, it's not just a vague threat because they want more power. That's that too, man. But yeah, it is.
You think the referendum would have held political weight, and that's why the government had no choice but to stop it?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that the referendum would have come, and the yes would have won, and then the government would have said, no, it's illegal, it doesn't count.
No, because the image
until the results say it's illegal or not, right? It's no. If you say no, then it's okay. But if you say yes, then no, we're going to stop you. Of course, they need to stop it before they know the results, because they cannot do a vote when there's no possibility to implement the results.
Right. I think the way we were looking at it from France was. The referendum didn't really matter because everyone understood that it would be only people who are for it who would go vote, and who are for secession who would go vote. So it would be really difficult for the Catalonian separatist parties to use this as a credible way of justifying anything, right? That's the way we looked at it, but I don't know if that's how it actually
imagine this. They have declared independence. I mean, independence has been declared even though less than half the population voted. I mean, imagine what would have happened if they would have gotten the legality or the support from the government. I mean,
well, that's the thing. Without
the situation,
the thing is, it seems to me that the result of the police violence was that a lot of people were sympathetic to the Catalonians because of, they felt they shouldn't be treated that way, when it wouldn't have been as easy to declare independence otherwise. But what you're saying is they would have anyway, and it would have gone through, and they would have had a more justifiable.
Definitely, they would have declared independence. Definitely, if the vote would have had the normal course. Yes, and the thing is, there's a whole another debate which I have had, and I have had many times with other friends from Spain, about if even though it's illegal, they should get the chance to vote, but not like this. I mean, it should be as part of a negotiation with the government, and it should be made correct. It's not. Again.
Well, yeah, but the government is never gonna agree to making it correctly, and I think another thing is also.
It could be done. I mean, it's not impossible. In Britain, for example, they were allowed the Scottish were allowed to vote, and again, of course, this government will not let them. Maybe some government sometime will let them. We don't know. But if you do it illegally, then you're really going against the system, and you should expect the system to respond.
It kind of occurs to me that another aspect of these very forceful interruptions of the voting is also a message sent to the future. Basically, the Spanish government is saying, don't even try it again, because people will know what this would incur, and it basically sends the message that Spain is not fucking around, basically. They will shut it down. There's another question.
I do think, but before that, I do think that the Catalans have done, and again, it's not that I'm against them, but they've done a really good PR campaign through Europe, trying to convince the rest of the countries in Europe about how they're, in a sense, victims of the Spanish state. And I do respect their position, but I do not think they're victims in this sense. Everyone has the right to think about their region, about the way they do, but they're not victims in this situation. Yes, the police violence was something to blame, but there has been many things. I mean, the police violence is just one among many things that have happened all along these years, and it shouldn't be the only image that the world or Europe has about the relationship between Spain and Catalonia.
When you're seeing what we saw during those things and the police violence and with social media and everyone, and it wasn't just one, it was dozens. It's really hard to see anything else at that point, which is why I'm saying it was badly played by the Spanish government. But I guess when you're explaining it the way you are, and I think something else that we're not gonna get is the opinion of the pro independence people, which I would be very happy to have someone on that could explain that at some point, or maybe in the comments. It's going to be easier if you go in the comments and let us know why that independence claim is justified and the reason behind it. Would be very interested to hear about that. But it's certainly some information that I didn't have, in the other end.
Definitely. I've lived in Madrid, so I have the position of the government in a way.
Right, of course. All right.
No, any opinion, but it's just that it is, yeah.
Yeah. Turkey. How's it going?
Sitting here listening about you guys talking about Spain.
I'm guessing that the Catalonia referendum or vote didn't make the news in Saudi Arabia, or maybe it did.
No, it did make the news, but we had another referendum that was more close to us, which was the Kurdish referendum in Iraq.
Ah.
Yeah, so that was more
maybe
the news.
Was that the biggest news in the last month?
That's one of the biggest news from the region. Yeah, that's the biggest news from the region.
So how was it? Can you tell us about it a little bit? We certainly heard about it in France as well, but
it's kind of complicated. Most of the people in Saudi definitely were opposed to the concept of the Kurds being an independent state. It's a very complicated situation in general, whether in Spain or in Iraq or so on. It keeps on. I would think, for example, how would I feel if it was like the eastern province in Saudi Arabia decided to go independent, where all the oil is, or the western province, Hijaz, wanted to be independent, where all the two holy Islamic cities of Mecca and Medina are. It's a kind of confusing whether to support such a movement or not. you can see the point of both sides. People who want to be independent, then you say, no, you're breaking about a nation that is established and connections and so on. And that's mostly the reaction with Kurdistan and the Kurds here in Saudi.
But in that case, it wasn't It wasn't binding, no, with the referendum.
It was illegal.
Well, it was illegal, but not binding in the sense that it automatically meant that they were independent after the referendum or anything.
No, it wasn't binding, but they were planning to declare independence. And the problem is with this situation, it's way worse than what would have happened in Spain. The problem with the Kurds is that the Kurds have lived in Turkey, parts of Syria, and parts of Iran. And those nations have zero interest in seeing an independent Kurdistan, because that basically would mean that one of these days those parts of their own countries would want to join that nation, because this is an ethnicity. Kurds are an ethnicity in the Arab world and in Turkey and so on. And they're not Arabs, they're Kurds. They also have their own language and everything, even though they're mostly Muslims. And the concept of breaking up, and Iraq is very unique in that the concept of Iraq has always been seen in the Arab world as a great nation. And the idea that it would be breaking down into different countries is just doesn't sit well with a lot of people in the Arab world in general.
So the reaction in the country was...
It was more of a worry reaction because of all the facts. One, no one wants to see Iraq divided. Two, they were worried about how the reaction of the other countries like Turkey. There were rumors that Turkey, if Kurdistan does actually declare independence, the Turkish army might come in and bring that country down because they don't want something like that to happen. Same reaction from the Iranian government, and so on. So this is what makes the Kurds different. Is they never had their own nation. They might be an ethnicity, but they never had their own nation in history, at least as far as I know. And that's what makes it unique, because people are saying, why is that even considered? Because there was never a Kurdish nation. Why are we trying to invent a new nation or a new country in the world?
I know it's a touchy subject, but does the conversation ever veer to Israel? No,
not really.
Okay, because creating a nation and all of this.
Yeah. No, because Israel is the concept of Israel is already established in Arab culture, and which is basically that. And I don't know, and Israel is also a complicated situation in general. Anyway, you have countries that have peace with Israel, like Jordan and Egypt, who recognize the government of Israel and so on. You have other countries who don't recognize Israel, period, as a government or as a country. And then you have those countries who, know there is a country called Israel, but they would rather not recognize it, and so on. But
right.
The Kurds and Israel might not be there has been a nation called Israel in the older days. There has been a country called Israel in the older days. But that was 2,000 years ago or something. And very few people would deny that existed. When it comes to Israel, people don't deny that Israel had existed at one time. They just deny that these are the same people who were the Israeli country. They're not the same people, so they shouldn't have the right for a country. The Kurds are different. The Kurds are actually an ethnicity that actually lived in that area for centuries and centuries, but they never ever had their own independent country.
Yeah, it sounds hard when you have to declare independence from three countries at the same time.
Actually, they were trying to get independent from Iraq right now, But
but you know that the other countries are going to be against it. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, because
and
they would be next.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if one of them is Turkey, which is really big, I mean, and then I don't know.
Turkey is one of the most aggressive anti-Kurdish
exactly.
state. Yeah.
I do want to ask about something else. I do want to ask about that women driving thing, which you alluded to earlier, but that's certainly something that we heard about in France, and I'm sure in other Western countries.
We took very well take care of the international media to make sure it knew about it.
Oh, do you think there's like a concerted effort to make sure people hear about it?
Okay. Yes, definitely.
Mm.
So what's your question?
Just the context, is it something that is, I've heard that it's about the economy, that the fact that you need drivers is a strain on families, and with the economy not going well, that there are other justifications than just being progressive.
There's so many theories. I personally believe it's a political theory. It's a political move and an international image move more than all the other theories.
But it's a costly move, isn't it? Because I'm from what I know, from what you're telling me about Saudi Arabia, what you've been telling me over the past few years, it's something that wouldn't be easy to push because the population is very divided on the topic, isn't it?
They're very divided, but I don't think this one is that difficult to push. Okay. This is where it comes down. It's more the divide on this part is because we've been living it so long. It's more than actually people firmly believe in this separation. It's just we live this. This is how we live. This is how it works. Keep in mind, in Saudi, there are actually women in Saudi who actually do drive right now, but you don't see them at all because they don't drive in cities. These are Bedouin women who live in camps and they travel around. You have women who are farmers, work on farms, and they actually drive cars in villages. They don't have licenses or anything, but they drive. It's like you would go to a village and you'll find women driving there.
Mm.
So as a concept, and then the belief system why women shouldn't drive is not that religious, because the basics of women not driving is not that women aren't allowed to drive. No religious scholar would even, at least extremely very few, rare extremists.
Are you telling us, Turkey, that the Quran didn't say explicitly that women couldn't drive?
Of course. No, the concept is what the majority of scholars have been saying is women driving can lead to some problems, and they put a list of problems. So it's better they don't drive just to avoid those problems.
Right, but it's not a super hard rule.
It's not. You would almost impossible. Well, I'm sure you'll find some extremist zealots who would say, it's anti-Islamic for women to drive. But no, the majority do believe women are allowed to drive. Women have, the basis of women driving is women riding horses or camels or coaches or whatever. And women have been riding those since the days of the Prophet, and traveling and doing business and so on. So the idea isn't that wrong Islamically. It's what could result from them driving.
So what are the fears then? That they would go to bars and do things alone that would be reprehensible?
Well, first let's have bars, then they can go and do
that.
Right,
okay, sorry. But you know what I mean, like to malls and coffee houses. And
it's something like that. It's you give women too much power. They get more freedom. They can start traveling alone, moving around. They could end up going to places they shouldn't eat more easily. They would pick up guys, stuff like that. It's more like theories like what would a woman do if her car breaks down in the middle of the road? How is she going to take care of that? What if a guy harasses her and she's alone in the middle of the road, and so on? So it's all of these concepts of what could that lead to. So
right.
so fighting that is not that impossible, and declaring it and doing it. I do have a problem with the concept of women driving. I don't have it as a person, the women drive. I do have a problem that they are going to suddenly open it like this, because I think they should have made it through different phases.
So what do you think what's the negative in this?
The negative in this, in Saudi, one, it's starting people to talk too much and fighting. Two, Saudi is a horrible place to drive, period. We have the highest rate of traffic deaths and traffic accidents in the world.
But that's the case regardless of whether or not women drive.
Yeah, that is. I'm not saying it's going to increase. Women are going to be part of going to increase it, but it is. We don't have a good traffic system here, and suddenly, and we don't have even good. We don't even have public transportation in Saudi. So what you're going to end up is just increasing the traffic, making things a lot more difficult, and people are already crazy drivers, and women are going to struggle a lot to be part of this driving culture in this country. So,
why do you say that? I don't really understand. I mean, they're going to be struggling more than men because they're women, and people are going to yell at them, or
yep, stuff like that.
Yeah, and so you would have. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So yeah, I would have gone more with going at phases. For example, let's start first of all. Let's give women who are doctors and teachers who need to get to work. Let's give them the license. And a year later, we go to the second phase. A year later, go second phase, and so on. It's try to ease it into the culture. Yeah. That's my personal opinion, but I at the end of the day, I support women driving 100%. So whether it's this way or that way, as long as they get the right, they should get it.
Okay.
But it's just my opinion.
And do you think that's going to cause more traffic? I mean, I know that of course women driving, more cars driving, but women moved. I mean, there were, I don't know, there were chauffeurs or
they have drivers, but I think
they have drivers.
It's more.
But this is the theory. Let's say a household has 3 daughters. They would only have one driver, one chauffeur, one car to drive them. Now, if they're allowed to drive, each one will have their own car. So you're going to increase the traffic on the road. And that's the majority.
I understand how it sounds to people in the audience, but it's also the reality of the country. And I mean, phases, I can see why you would want it to happen in phases, for sure. But
for me personally, I would at least want to have a public transportation so people can have options.
Right.
Before increasing the traffic.
There aren't any talks of having a bus system, at least, which would be relatively easy to implement?
We do have. We are actually, Riyadh City is now working on the largest project of public transportation maybe in the world. They're building 5 metro lines and then cover the entire city in a bus system. And it's costing like over $37 billion to do. And they're 2.5 years away from completing it. So it's coming. For Riyadh City, for example, I know they're planning projects, but they haven't started any of it in the other major cities, like Jeddah City and Dammam City. Those are the second 2 major cities. So yeah, they're working on public transportation. It's just not available yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully this will look like a tiny bump in that particular issue. Like whether they do it in 5 years or in one, in 10 years, it's not going to be that important.
Let everybody who's listening know I'm just being selfish here. The simple thing is, I don't want the traffic to increase because I have enough problem driving to work. So I'm just being absolutely selfish in this situation.
All right. Well, I think that is an excellent conclusion to this episode.
That's Manal. She's shouting. She knows it.
Wait. I just wanted to say that big thing in Peru is that it's possibly going to the World Cup next year, which is like the I don't know that thing that's going on.
We'll get back to you for just a second. Turkey. Manao is walking around, your wife, for those who don't know.
Yeah.
Ask her if she's happy that she's going to be allowed to drive.
Are you happy that you're going to be allowed to drive? She says she's too spoiled. She'll just keep her chauffeur.
Fair enough. Okay.
If I had a driver, I would drive.
She said she'll get a license just in case, but she would rather someone else drives her around.
But so you're gonna keep the chauffeur, even though she's gonna be allowed to drive. So that's kind of an expense that it's harder to justify, isn't it?
Trust me, I can understand where she's coming from. If I could afford it, I would get my own chauffeur.
Okay, so she pays for it herself, is what you're saying.
There's also you have to know one thing other about Saudi, which is basically parking. This country does not have parking.
So you need the chauffeur to be driving around as you're shopping, increasing the traffic.
When I go to work, I actually have to drive around inside the neighborhood to find a place to park on the street.
That's how I did it as well in Paris for a long time, but yeah.
Yeah, there is zero parking in this city, and there's no option of public transportation, so...
Yeah. All right. Franco, you were telling us about the big story from Peru, which is
it looks stupid, but for Peru it's really important because it's been 30-something years since Peru doesn't go to the World Cup, and right now we need to beat New Zealand in November in a couple of weeks, and then we would go, and I'm pretty sure that if we go, I don't know, the national GDP will increase by 2% at least. It's one of those things that you think it doesn't matter, but for the people's morale, it's really important. Everyone now has become a football fan. Everyone has wearing the T-shirt. I receive photos. The only photos that I receive from my friends are things that has to do something with football. I don't know, dogs dressed like football players, or I don't know. It's really
like
crazy.
Football players. What's the population in Peru?
Like 30 million people.
Okay, so it's not a small country.
No,
so
it's
I'm
not
sure
small.
Things like that happen sometimes. Why is it so big?
Yeah. No, because I don't know. In Peru, the national sport, as in everywhere in Latin America, it's football. Everyone's a fan of football. Everyone plays football. It's really crazy, but we're not that really good, apparently.
Okay. How good are you guys?
How good are you?
How bad? I want to know how bad, because to make sure they go against Saudi if they're bad.
I don't know. No, of course we're good, but not that good. And it's always we've always thought that it's unfair for us to have to play against all the countries in Latin America, but because they're also so good that even though we're not that bad, we cannot enter. So it's usually a mixture between chance and only chance possibly that makes us go to the World Cup. And we had it this time. And I don't know, it's as crazy as it can. And usually all the classifications for World Cups are crazy in the sense that every citizen. I'm telling this because there's a lot of people that do not feel the idea of, okay, maybe my country will go this time to the World Cup, because I don't know, France always goes. There's many countries that go always. Spain always goes, but Peru, no. And it's really important. Everyone is always doing like the math calculations to estimate the probability that we're going, if we win this match and then this country loses this match with this other country, then we can go. But they're insanely complicated. Because there's, there's still 4 matches. When some time ago there were 4 matches to go at the still, and we had like these very complicated tables showing all the possible combinations of winning and losing by so many goals, and they say, okay, if this happens, then we go. If this happens, then we may go. If this other condition, I don't know. It's really crazy. So I'm really hoping we win New Zealand and we have a chance. Doesn't matter what we do in the World Cup, but we have at least gone.
It's kind of, yeah, it's very true what you were saying. We're usually in the World Cup, and so it doesn't really factor in. But I understand that a country that wouldn't usually be there, if they have a chance to be there, and where football is so popular, then yes, I understand it would make basically the GDP rise significantly. All right. I think that's going to be it for this very long show. Thank you if you stuck with us until the end. Why don't you, Turkey, tell us where we can find you on the internet?
Well, as usual, you can find me on Twitter at Turkey Albella, TurkiAlballa. And from time to time, I put some posts, and you can see how crazy I am on those occasions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. The link will be in the show notes. Franco, are you still only on Google Plus?
Well, as a matter of fact, I started a blog recently. Well, just for some time, and I'm thinking on starting another one where about Toulouse, in fact, about my initiation in the city. But I haven't written anything yet, so it doesn't really matter now. But, yeah, hopefully someday I'll have something to share.
All right. Well, in the meantime, I leave your Google Plus account there, and
I guess I will put the blog post in the Google Plus, so everyone in the internet can know it exists.
Exactly. That would be perfect. So for me, it's Not Patrick on Twitter and on Facebook, of course. You can also find the show at FrenchSpin.com. You can go comment there in case you want to tell us some things that we got wrong or some things that we got right that you didn't necessarily think about before and you thought we made a great point. It happens sometimes. But if you want to have a conversation and a discussion, it's always nice to see people commenting there. If you want to support the show, you can do so at Patreon. You know Patreon, of course. You just go create an account and decide how much you want to contribute to the show for every episode published, and at the end of the month you get billed for that amount. And it's super simple. The account takes like literally 2 minutes to create, and you can stop anytime. So there is no, you shouldn't feel, like you're trapped or anything. You can just contribute, stop when you want, continue if you want to after a while. It's super easy to do, and it really does help, get the show together, because as you can guess, it's not an easy show to put together. So patreon.com/the Phileas Club. It is, the link is available in the show notes. You can check that out, and that's about it, I suppose. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back very soon, hopefully with an interesting episode, and we'll talk to you then. All right, bye everyone.